Hey guys, what's going on? John here from What's Spinning, here tonight to chat about this new Mountain Goats album, In League with Dragons. Mountain Goats, Durham, North Carolina's folk legends, led by the legendary John Darnielle. They've been out since the early 90s at this point, and by now, if you're not into them, honestly, their discography is staggering. From albums like All Hail West Texas to Transcendental Youth, the Mountain Goats have actually covered a lot of ground and a lot of topics over the years. However, it's been the last couple of years that's really, blown me away, to be honest. 2015's Love Letter to Pro Wrestling, Beat the Champ, was really a heartwarming and well-written album if there ever was one from the Mountain Goats. Not to mention, most importantly, it was insanely catchy as well. And 2017's Goths, absolutely blew my mind at the time. I mean, you're talking about a folk band that's been together for over 20 years, coming out with an album in 2017 that doesn't feature a single guitar. I thought to myself going into that album that I was just going to be very bored with it. But no, John Darnielle and the Mountain Goats actually have a way of making things work, and it's actually become quite possibly my favorite album in their entire massive discography. And their new singles that they've been dropping lately have been pretty darn solid as well. Let's chat about this thing. This album starts off with Done Bleeding, and honestly, it's a pretty great intro. I love the way that this one sort of builds over time and adds one very lavish instrumental after another. Actually, this might just be me, but it's actually pretty crazy to hear them working with this sound after just how radically different Goths was. Overall, this is just a really great freaking song. That actually has completely 100% to do with John Darnielle's performance. Once again, he cements himself as one of modern folk's greatest. There's times where his voice does get a little nasally, let's be real, but here, he comes off legitimately really freaking cool. He's calm, he's collected, there's just a really likable performance all around. It's emotional and, even more importantly, seriously nostalgic at times. I can't be mad with this. Then we have Younger, which I've said for months is a fantastic single. It's a nothing fancy, pretty straightforward folk rock tune, but they sound great here. I love just how sprawling and vast this track sounds, and the continued focus on pianos is really nice as well. Not to mention, John Darnielle, what a freaking storyteller. This is such a visual album, and I love that. And sure, if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty, it's a very cleanly produced track. There's not a lot of edge to it, but I'm fine with that. This is just a really great Mountain Goats song, and that chorus is just so warm and inviting. Once again, you're going to hear me saying this a lot here. This is a very nostalgic tune. Love that. This album might not be the most genre-defining in their discography. As a matter of fact, it's pretty tame compared to their last two releases. However, this album just sort of seems to be just a reminder of how truly great the Mountain Goats are. This album's title track, In League with Dragons, is a pretty upbeat folk tune. The strong fantasy vibes surrounding this album are certainly very interesting. I do have to say, though, that I'm not really as into it as I was with the material on Goths and Beat the Champ. But still, this is far from a bad track. I actually really like the slide guitar and the southern twang to this one. Not to mention the sunny vibes throughout. It's very pleasant. And, call me crazy, I think Cadaver Sniffing Dog might be the best track here. It's a strangely determined and almost rough track from the Mountain Goats. Did not see that happening. Even John Darnielle in his vocal performance sounds a little wound up. It's totally a different sound for them, but I'm actually kind of in love with it. Now, lyrically, this album continues to be sort of a hodgepodge. It's very diverse for a Mountain Goats album, especially for them in the last couple of years. But I can't hate this track at all. And that ripping guitar solo, where the hell did that come from? Now, overall, I don't have a lot of bad things to say about this album. I think it's a very safe, very solid album from the Mountain Goats. There are a few tracks, though, that do underwhelm me. For one, Passaic 1975. This to me just isn't nearly as refreshing to hear. Of all the tunes here, I feel like this one sounds the most flimsy. And it's a shame because I feel like John Darnielle's performance, once again, is really wowing. His storytelling, his way with words, honestly, I feel like this track is worth listening to just for that. But the remainder of this track is sadly just not as fresh. Even the melody here at the end of the day just isn't as likable. And Clemency for the Wizard King I thought I would be really into. It's a little bulkier, dare I say heavier. I'm actually really into this track as far as an instrumental goes. But in a shocking twist, I feel like this is John Darnielle's worst track here lyrically. Like I said earlier, the last two albums of the Mountain Goats really struck me much harder lyrically, but this album still is wonderfully written, but this track here just seems a little flimsy once again. Honestly, it just leaves me with more questions than anything. It just makes me shrug. I mean, sure, it's pleasant while it's on, but I honestly can't remember much more about it. And I hate to say it, but Going Invisible 2 just absolutely sucks. It's supposed to be this very quiet, meditative tune that builds slowly, which on paper from the Mountain Goats sounds really exciting. But even though I do sort of like the attitude that John shows here, and some of the harmonies are really great, I can't help but just find myself really bored with this. And while I'm at it, I don't really think that Sicilian Crest is that good of a finale. Now, I don't think that this is the worst tune here. I actually think it has a lot of great elements to it. It's very hopeful, it's very sunny, and I do like how upbeat it is. But I honestly just can't help but feel like this one is a little off. John Darnielle in his performance here just doesn't sound sure of himself. And not for nothing, but I feel like the previous track on this album would have been so much more of an interesting finale. While we're on that topic, let's talk about An Antidote for Strychnine. Honestly, the synths here give me the freaking chills. It may just be my serious love of their Goths album, but it just makes me really eat it up. Not to mention here, I just love John's very somber, stark, practically spoken word performance here. It's honestly one of the most unbelievably written tracks of the bunch. It may be my favorite track here. Like, take note, this is how the Mountain Goats should be putting out ballads and slower tunes. And halfway through, when this one picks up a little bit, it honestly gets even bigger and better, almost jazzy in parts. Honestly, this would have fit very nicely on their Goths album. I'd really like to hear more of this sound. Thankfully, the rest of this album just seems to be like a really solid progression for the Mountain Goats. Even this late into their career, they do have a few tricks up their sleeves. Possum by Night is just simply put freaking classy. I love the very stripped down ballad-like feel here that just puts so much focus on Darnielle and his performance. That's what I've loved about them in the last couple of years, and I love it here. Speaking of John Darnielle's performance, this may be his most emotionally strong and passionate performance of the bunch. It's in times like this that you just know that this track just hits so hard home with him. It's where I love hearing the Mountain Goats the most. Like I said, it's a great progression for the band, even after all these years. Not to mention there is a cinematic and epic feel to this that I just love. And Doc Gooden is really interesting as well. It's very sunny and upbeat once again, and in a weird way, this track almost has like sort of a groove to it. I don't know where that came from. Between that, the continued use of some slide guitar and some continued focus on synths, alongside these backing vocals, like this track is great. And once again, it's in moments like this that John Darnielle just sounds at his most comfortable. And I really love Waylon Jennings live as well. This continued use of slide guitar, A+. And with these themes of Waylon Jennings floating throughout, yeah, it hits home a lot harder. The harmonies are sunny, the instrumental is breezy, this is a great sound. So overall, I feel like this is a very safe album for the Mountain Goats, but I don't mean that in a bad way. The majority of this album just showcases the sheer songwriting and storytelling talent of John Darnielle, and is just such a great reminder of just what the Mountain Goats can do when they're focused. Hell, we even see them break out a few new tricks, even though they're like 20 plus years into their stint together. And while, like I said, this one didn't really stop me in my tracks as much as Beat the Champ or Goths, this is still a great album. I still think that, like, I would much rather listen to this than half of what passes for folk these days. I'm feeling a strong 7 on this album, but let me know what you guys think down below. If you liked the video, be sure to give us a like, give us a subscribe, and let me know down below what you guys would like for me to chat about in the future. Until next time, have a great day, guys.